So Ron said he didn't need an introduction, but I'm going to give him one anyway because there are new people that may not know Buzz McDaniel. Did you know that he was the president of the OU Tulsa Alumni Club? Have any of you ever been involved in anything like that? And to be the president, it just gives me chills because of and to think being on the education committee here is complicated, right, Buzz? And he's also past executive director of Tulsa Metropolitan Ministries. He was president also, but think about being the executive director of TMM. What a great job. So I looked up also, he's been on the education committee forever. He actually chaired it, but he's also on the board of the Educational Development Corporation. I think Buzz has education in his heart. And today he's going to talk about scary artificial intelligence. It's my pleasure to introduce Buzz McDaniel.
Hey, did that do any good? Yeah. Well, thank you all very much. It's a pleasure to be with you. We're going to try to talk about artificial intelligence this morning. The fact that I'm willing to try this questions my intelligence. That's step number one. So be prepared. A couple of things just in kind of getting ready came into mind. One, I have no idea why, but it goes back many years. And one evening I was sitting at home reading, and my late wife, Betty, whom many of you may have known, was in the kitchen. She walked in and said, "What are you reading?" I said, "Well, I'm reading The Panda's Thumb." And she looked at me with this look like, "Why me, Lord? Why would I have to put up with a man that's reading The Panda's Thumb?" Well, in my defense, it was a book about biology by Stephen Jay Gould. But I kind of have been cursed a little bit with a certain amount of curiosity, I suppose. And that's what led me to volunteer. Is it okay? Sorry. And I've commented that really nothing I've ever attempted to try to understand has been as complicated and difficult to grasp as this subject is. It is, as you all know, things are written about it daily. You turn on the television set or whatever it might be, and they're talking about artificial intelligence. There was a cover on the Economist magazine about a month ago that indicated that approximately $3 trillion will be spent in the next 4 years, $3 trillion, on investment in artificial intelligence and its impact and so forth, and what we will be able to expect from it. My interest or effort in terms of what we'll be talking about today will be to try to understand. I'm approaching it not at all, in fact, from what the next wonderful gadget will be, and whether we'll have something that can drive us across town upside down and then fly us to the airport. Those are not the intent of what we're trying to look at today. I was curious because I wondered culturally and religiously what the impact of artificial intelligence, and my initial judgment was there's going to be, if it is, and if we are coming to a moment, which many, many people believe has started, of a truly transformational moment in human history, that there will just simply be no way in which religion and culture will be unimpacted. We will feel it, and it will change us. And so I thought maybe we would try to go back and start a little from the very early phases of human history to where we get today and see if we can tie things together. Now, while you're still awake, I wanted to give a definition or so here. the singularity. I don't know if many of you are familiar with that, but it is a word that's being used in the field of AI by certain people quite often. And I want to offer a dictionary description of what a singularity is. And again, this is a belief that there's an important event we can anticipate. The singularity is a hypothetical moment in time when artificial intelligence and other technologies have become so advanced that humanity undergoes a dramatic and irreversible change. Okay, I'll repeat that one time. A hypothetical moment in time when AI and other technologies have become so advanced that humanity undergoes a dramatic and, I think this is important, irreversible change. This is the belief of many people that it is the stage at which we are now entering. And so it is significant, and it's, to say the least, hard to even begin to grasp what it all is involved in it. I wanted to go back a long way and try to tie a couple, three things together on this. That human history, by and large, as defined by Homo sapiens, and when we came up with the terminology Homo sapiens to describe what we are as a species, it meant wise man or wise human. So Homo sapiens is a wise man or wise human. And we came as the latest in these geological epochs. Pleistocene, Miocene, which I have no idea what the name of them encompass, and we're in the Holocene at this particular moment in time. At least that is what it is called. Most of these are marked by the following. They are marked by distinct geological weather conditions that impact all the people living on Earth, all the creatures living on Earth, the plants, trees, and so forth. It is the determinant factor in how life is living at that point in time. So we're in the Holocene period. The Holocene period started about 11,500 years ago, roughly. And we began to emerge, Homo sapiens did at that time, and continued in a very, very favorable geological set of conditions. Moderate temperatures, not extreme cold. In fact, as the Holocene started at the end of the last ice age, but it was a situation that provided the optimum opportunity, I should say, for humanity to emerge, to grow, and to realize many advances. Well, this continued, and this is an area which is a point of discussion for a lot of people in the scientific community, up until we reached what is now being called, not entirely accepted, but it's called the Anthropocene. And this is a belief right now that this is a period that we live in. We moved out of what we call the Holocene, into the Anthropocene. I know that you're on the edge of your seats right now with this. I'm going to lower the excitement level down any minute here. But we have entered into the Anthropocene. And this is a current geological age during which human activity has been the dominant influence in the climate and the environment. Now, there's a lot of discussion when this began, or has it happened. Most of the people I have read seem to think we're clearly in another epoch, if you could use that terminology, and that the Anthropocene is correct and that it is dominated by human conditions. Some individuals take it as far back as the beginning of the Industrial Revolution is when we entered into this particular period. Other scientists put it a much more current time, say in the last 75 to 100 years. Anyway, this is the process by which we find ourselves at this point in time. And certainly it would appear that human activity has influenced to an extraordinary level our climate and all of the conditions around us. We have seen the extinction of enormous numbers of species due to our actions. We've seen the extinction of plants and so forth. We have definitely changed and challenged the world in which we live. There's in terms of trying to take one final step before we step back, a gentleman named Ray Kurzweil has written a book, and the title of the book is "The Singularity is Near." He had written a book called "The Singularity." Mike Burton will help me on this. Mike, "Singularity is Near," I think, and then this second book was "It is Near." And remember, the singularity is this moment when we have such a huge change that humanity will be forced to go irreversible changes. And he's offered, I don't know whether you call it a theory or a concept. And he said that basically history has gone through will go through 6 epochs. And that is periods of time that have been isolated, determined. We can look back and say, this happened here, this happened here, this happened here. And it was a dominant factor in society at that time. Under Mr. Kurzweil's perspective, we're in the 5th epoch at this point in time. And this is the epoch where human cognizance emerges to a very, very advanced level. And for the first time, the possibility, and in fact, he believes the reality will occur, that digital technology will be merged with human cognitive thinking. Now, folks, that's more than having an automobile that you don't have to drive. It is an enormous step, and it is the belief of many, many people in the scientific community that it will bring about an enormous transformation of society. Now, kind of running backwards, Homo sapiens. Let's just talk real quickly about this. Let's give ourselves, as I say, back in that 11,000 period. And Homo sapiens during this time, most of the time up until perhaps the last 1,000 years at the most, probably close to 500 years, has really kind of lived coping with 3 major challenges. One is war. War is always a factor. The second is starvation, the lack of food that impacts people. And the third is, I don't know whether you would call it pestilence, but it's the emergence of illnesses that simply overcome society, not overcome, but sweep it and impact it so often. Just a couple of examples how even relatively recently it was that in France, I guess back it was something 1692, 1694, roughly 15% of the population starved to death. That was some 2.6 million people, as historians have looked at. You can go through history and find innumerable illustrations of that, and we certainly have had witnesses of that in our lifetime. But it is, I think, a general conclusion to say now, when we look around ourselves, I got to thinking as I was reading on this, that I simply am unaware of reading or hearing about someone in the United States starving to death. I don't know if you all recall that or not. Certainly we've heard often about the fact that we have people who are undernourished, need more food and so forth, and we have to provide assistance on this. But in terms of just out members of our society starving to death, I think it would be very hard to find that as a case. And if you move into Western Europe and so forth, and into the eastern portions of the world, into China and Japan and so on, China much more recently, Japan. I would suggest that now that is an almost extraordinarily uncommon event. Now, it has happened in areas in Africa. We have seen some in the Mideast, but more often than not, these are the result of human political actions. Given those factors, it would probably not be happening because with the technological changes we have, there seems to be an adequate amount of food on the world today to feed everyone. It is the problem of political distribution that occurs. So in a sense, we've kind of moved beyond that. We haven't moved beyond solving all of it, but the fact of starvation and complete lack of food that at one time or another haunted society has largely been dealt with, if we can get over the political problems. The second, of course, are the plagues that have gone throughout society. And once again, in terms of numbers, we have made rather substantial progress in that area. If you remember the Spanish flu plague that hit the world in roughly 1918 to 1920, it is estimated, and when I was reading this, I was quite surprised about this. It's an enormous sort of variation, but they think that at least 50 million people died of this worldwide, and they really think, many people think it's much, much closer to the 150 to 200 million people died of this particular entity as it swept the world. Far more people died from the Spanish plague than died in World War I because of the military action. Roughly 40 million people died World War I, 50 to 200 million people died as a result of the plague that followed with what we call Spanish flu. We still have our hands full with that. We've had a pretty recent experience of a worldwide event in COVID-19, and it has been one that has been significant. In terms of numbers, it was dealt with reasonably effective, and response and control of it, or relative control, happened fairly rapidly. Our country came in, I think it was roughly about 1,200,000 people died of COVID. And we were number one, if you want to use that terminology. We were the world's leader in the number of people dying from COVID. But when you contrast that to, and roughly 6 million worldwide, 50 million, it is an area that is quite different. And the people that look at it and write about it say that a part of it was rather poor handling of the situation by political leaders around the world that made the plague be as severe as it was for as long as it was, and that we developed responses to it much, much more rapidly than had happened in the past. That it is an area where not gone, but dealing with these widespread illnesses, there's a chance that we will be able to deal with them much more effectively and will not have the strength over society. Well, the third end then, of course, is war. And that is one that, if you look at numbers, the straight numbers, so far in this century, far fewer have died than have died in the 1900s, without any question. But then again, we had World War I and II. Then we had overwhelming numbers of persons killed. Once again, most of those are political problems that we all are very aware of now, and we'd like to be optimistic and say we've solved the problem of war. Doesn't seem to have happened yet, but I think we don't, I think at this point in time, necessarily view so much as inevitable as maybe it once was thought of. It does happen, but all of our efforts are constructed to try to prevent it from occurring. Well, that's sort of kind of a run of some of the problems that we have faced. And during that time, Homo sapiens has developed immense technological progress. We've made immense progress in the fields of medicine. And life is, generally speaking, much, much easier for us, for the species as a whole. During this time, we started taking some kind of what I guess you would call major scientific steps that, as we look back, and if you were a person living in the 1600s, and you would look and say, my goodness, they've got something that goes up in the air and flies. They've got something that goes underwater and you don't drown. When people get sick, they finally seem to have some way, rather than calling upon the gods to come and help cure them, that can actually resolve and deal with that problem. And you go on and on with all of the transformative changes that have occurred in our lifetime. And the fact that from the perspective of people looking back at this point in time, I think you would say these are the work of gods, as was understood at that point in time. That this is certainly more than you could expect humans to do. And so there began to emerge sort of, I wouldn't call it a movement, but a way of thinking and an attribution that began to call it Homo Deus, man as God. And that is sort of a thinking that has begun to emerge within the scientific community. It's certainly not everyone views it and calls it that way, but it is that form of thinking. Now, when you hear that spoken, I'd like to suggest that this is not a claim of divinity and infinity. It is more a claim, if we might utilize it, to say this is something like perhaps the gods from way back of the Greek gods and the Roman gods. Mars was the god of war, the various gods that had really superb, incredible powers that far exceeded that of most humans. And so that's kind of the point I think that we have came to in the early phases of the development and the concept of calling it ourselves not ourselves, we're not calling it, but the concept of man as God. It is the taking on of certain powers that always been attributed to the divine. And we're now being attributed to the skills and abilities of Homo sapiens. Well, that's kind of where we are in our thinking up to the very recent years, in my best guess. And then we begin to talk a little bit about what seems to be going on now and what's going on in the future. I kind of had two thoughts, absolutely unrelated to anything. You may say, that's just a continuation of what we've had. Nothing new here. There was I don't know why I thought of it, but there was a fellow, I don't know whether it was Yogi or someone else. It was one of the baseball figures. A guy came in and said, how do you think the rest of the race is going to turn out in this year's baseball season? And he said, well, he said, I can't predict until it actually happens. Well, many ways, I think these predictions we make are relatively unsure. The second one is a very personal one that, again, we have to just sort of look at things and realize that our best thoughts and best efforts are certainly always influenced by our experiences. There's no question in that. And this group that has come together and visits, and by the very nature of kind of our constitution, if you would say that about our class, is one that is trying to look at and reach out and understand and expand new things and in new ways, or at least looking at things to do items that are challenges. And so what I kind of wanted to, at this point, turn to was, how does this potentially impact culture and religion? As I mentioned earlier, it seems difficult to imagine that it will not do both or has not already done both. And so how do we think? Because let us turn back to the area of medicine, which Dr. Lynch will provide in learned presentation next week, as contrasted to unlearned presentation this week. We are moving into area with that I think, generally speaking, that there are great expectations that the combination of the advances of artificial intelligence in medicine, very, very positive opportunities and experiences exist there. And I think we can look at it with a lot of optimism. Bob, I hope I'm not overstating. I think many have already happened. Some, at least, have already happened at this point in time, the combination of these two. But there is the general belief that that will be an area. There's a kind of in looking at AI also, we look at the field of electronics and mechanics and so forth. And we have great confidence there that many, many more positive things are going to happen in that area. The question that we're coming to that I think is going to be the most challenging to us will be the understanding and limitations of what this information will bring about and how we will use it. Now, I'm going to turn to, in the area, making a generalization, that there is now, I believe, more of a conversation and belief that in the upcoming years ahead, that we will overcome death. Kind of a big step. This belief, as I understand it, takes a concept of death in a little bit different understanding that we have. In our religious structure and experiences, we have to acknowledge that death has played a very big part of our understanding and our faith. We look at our lives, we live them, we know that we have positive, great experiences, some not so great, but that the purpose of it is that in the living of our life, when we come to that final moment, because of our belief and hopefully the lives that we've led, we will enter in to the final situation of being a part of the ultimate kingdom of God. That is not only true of Christianity, same belief I think exists in the Islamic faith and so forth. It is a significant part of it, and if we could say anything about it, it gives life meaning and it gives death meaning. And we accept that as a part of our life and our situation. And all of us realize that something will happen. In many ways, I think it motivates us to take hold of our life now in a very strong and positive way. The concept of death is still of overcoming death as a result of what is developing here on down the road, is probably still in a minority situation within the scientific community, as best I can read and understand. But it is being considered by more people now and more persons as a possibility that this could occur. Now, this concept, as I understand it, is perhaps to explain, doesn't necessarily mean that everybody gets to live forever for all time. Things can still happen that will cause people to die. You might be involved in an airplane crash that just absolutely decimates and destroys everyone on it, and your life will come to an end. But with proper attention and care, which will involve, again, as I understand it, probably frequent, or maybe not frequent, maybe as one is happening even at this time. One of the persons in the scientific community is going in roughly on a 10-year basis. And it's like a tune-up. Really is the illustration I would best use. You get all of your bones get fortified, your various internal organisms get rehabilitated and re-strengthened. Your muscles and so forth are also rehabilitated. And so when you emerge, if you walked in expecting to live for 30 years, you will walk out still like probably back to your 50 and 60-year expectation of life. But it's sort of a 10-year tune-up. And it's certainly at this point in time not available to the average folks. You and I don't go into your doctor and ask for his tune-up. Probably likely look at you as a little bit strange. But there's this belief and conviction on some people that this is happening. Excuse me. One author that I was reading said, if you were out on the West Coast and walking by an extremely wealthy person, you just might be walking by the first person scheduled to live forever. We are at this point, and that's how close we think. Now, again, I hope Bob will deal with this. The understanding on many of these people is that death is not something that is an event in life that we call everyone together and stand together and issue the final words and so forth. It is a functional failure of the body. You die because of something, not just, in most cases, just your body wears out, your system wears out, and then you eventually die from that. The rather interesting comment that was made by one author is that our life expectancy in terms of what Homo sapiens had at the outset of where it is today probably is not greatly different from what it was many thousands of years ago. It was roughly 70 to 80, that's a 70 to 80 year life expectancy. We look back on Galileo and various other scientists lived in the 70s and 80s and so forth. What has changed during that time and created the great improvement of life expectancy is the fact that so many people are killed by disease and so forth at much younger ages. That we live now, the life expectancies that our bodies were fundamentally evolved and constructed to live. So, again, from the point of view of these scientists looking at it, if we can get over those failures of the system, then we ought to be able to continue to move on almost indefinitely. Again, this is not a view shared by everyone, but it is a view that is certainly being considered now. And it is, interestingly enough, within what I would call the scientific AI community that I've read, kind of a large number of people, it's a primary goal. Kind of, what was I, if I can remember correctly, the old Woody Allen joke said, would you like to be remembered by your films? He said, no, I'd like to be remembered because I'm still alive. That's kind of where we are in terms of the view of many of these scientists. It really is a very strong preoccupation, apparently. the desire to keep living on and to be a part of the rest of life. Now, that viewpoint is the outgrowth of the development, as I perceive it anyway. An attitude like that 50 to 75, or let's say 100 to 150 years ago would have probably been chuckled at and thought, well, isn't that an ironic, sort of unique type of individual? But it is certainly the outgrowth of scientific developments over the last, beginning, I'm going to suggest, in the last 75 to 100 years, which involves the development of mechanical intelligence. Mechanical intelligence, artificial intelligence, whatever the terminology may be, began quite a few more years before we've been hearing about it recently. The concept and the idea that this could happen goes back, and the reading I remember, it was like in some maybe late 1800s, but certainly by the early 1900s, there were isolated individuals who began to think this was a possibility. So we have this idea of artificial intelligence. We're seeing great improvement in the medical treatments and so forth. And there's a general belief that there's just almost an infinite number of possibilities. As I mentioned at the first, and one or two of you commented upon, you really can hardly turn on the television set or pick up a magazine in which you're not going to be one or two or three articles talking about AI. It has that status and position and relative importance in our society today. Well, there is where we have been, and again, scientific progress has been pretty significant. This brings us to the next item, which is a good bit more controversial. And it is called AGI, and that is artificial general intelligence. And that is considered the great challenge that we're facing at this point in time. And as I best understand it, and that's an enormous limitation, as best I understand it, it is the belief that we will be able to create artificial intelligence that is fully the equal in every way of the human mind. In every way. And in fact, the belief that over the course of time, it will far exceed the capacities of the human mind. Sounds good, right? AGI, wonderful. Well, there are some concerns that accompany it. One is, there's some people that think, scientists, very respected individuals within the scientific community, that simply think that is utter nonsense. There is simply no way that this transformation, grasping and understanding all the way the human mind works, and all the complexities of that, and you'll be able to translate it into, a gigantic computer system, and you'll be able to do just the same things or much more than you would get with a human being. They view that as I say, absolutely unable to be achieved. On the other side of the coin is people who are very fearful that it actually can happen. The fear is, with AGI and general intelligence, that we may be able to develop, and I would say that many, many very intelligent people that are well known, Sam Altman is a name you may be familiar with, I think the gentleman that started ChatGPT, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, all of these people are absolutely persuaded that AGI is inevitable and that it's coming. And it will be realized anywhere from the next 10 years to 50 years, but it is in their minds not a matter of if, but it is a matter of when. And that when then brings with it the question of it may be created, and we may see some incredible things with it. But the fact that we've created it is accompanied with uncertainty whether we will be able to control it. Now, during this same time frame, we will have, I believe occurred, the singularity, and the singularity that is coming, described in Mr. Ray Kurzweil's book, is this. He thinks sometime, maybe as early as in the next 5 years, but certainly within the next 10 to 15 years, that we for the first time will be able to transfer external, I guess you would call them electronic, but digital items into the human brain. And so that will mean that the capacity of humanity will have begun to expand enormously. And that it is the belief that this is coming. Now, to give you an illustration very quickly, I guess you call them neural impulses or whatever it might be in your brain, that we humans are capable currently, I assume they know what they're talking about saying this, but they make the statement that we're capable of having several hundred neural impulses per second in our brain. The standalone digital entities at this point in time will be several billion per second. Several billion per second as contrasted to several hundred per second. And that this input from the external sources into the internal sources of the mind will lead to the condition where we will move into the AGI. That, of course, no one knows whether that will happen or not happen, successfully or not happen. As I say, whomever you may read have certainly different opinions. But it is a dramatic concept, I think, in our minds. The progress that largely we have made as humanity throughout the history of our existence has been the bringing in the utilization of external tools. Machines, whatever you may say. We're able to build dams. We're able to pour concrete. All of these are the utilization of external items that create the life frame in which we live, and certainly it's been generally conceived to be for the better. This is the first time we're saying that it will be the placement of an internal digital entity into Homo sapiens, which will be then the source of future improvement, activity, and so on. Well, there's three things about this thing that I have to be kind of careful on our time. That this idea and this concept moves in my mind to what you might call the worship of data. That's a significant part of the upcoming world. It is the belief on the part of the scientific community that scientific technology is the source of all future understanding, enhancement of life, and so forth. And so we turn back, to kind of a little bit of the initial concept that I was looking into. And that was, okay, how is this going to relate to our religion and our beliefs and so forth? And as I said, it certainly seemed like it would be pretty significant. It is one person's opinion that there is really no question that the believers in the absolutism of scientific technology have embraced it in the same way that we might have embraced our religion. It is to them, to scientific technology, that we look to see the problems, that we solve the problems through that, and that humanity is enhanced, grown, and developed from that. 2 or 3 kind of general observations. One is, number one, the expectation of life and the elimination of disease, pain, and suffering through ailment. Well, our belief has been, certainly, we embrace that more and more, but we also believe that our faith can be a source of sustenance during that time and period, and there are many around who believe we are healed by our faith. That is where we get our... This other is very much an external entity that we're taking in. The notion of eternal life. Certainly one of the great, I don't know what the right word is, but certainly one of the fundamental groundworks of our faith is the belief that as we come to the end of our lives, we recognize and realize, because I mentioned earlier, because of our beliefs and so forth, that we are preparing to enter into the next enlightened state, heaven, whatever you may wish to call it. And therefore, death isn't particularly something that we have to fear. It is something that is just a part of what existence is. We all know it's going to happen. It's part of our life, and we accept it, and it gives us a sense of hope and optimism as we live along. The same thing really exists in a sense with scientific technology religion. That offering the same hope. They will be able to solve all the diseases. They will be able to offer, if not eternal life, very long life. And so it's a matter of great significance. The third is, of course, the overcoming of death. Now, real quickly, and I shouldn't be this long, but I'm going to ask a question for you just to take and carry home with you over the next week. Because it isn't a frivolous one at this point in time, I don't think anyway. How would you like to live to 150 years old? Kind of think about that for a moment. 150 years old. You're going to sign that up. Well, of course, in all probability, it is right. Now, you sort of wonder about celebrating wedding anniversaries. Well, we're celebrating our golden 100th. There's just a lot of things in life when you think about that would be radically different. Look at your children. My son is 120 years old. Just a lot of changes there. Next step is, I'm going to ask you, how many of you would like to live to 500 years of age? Yes, there's no question. Their assumption works on the idea that this will be able to provide the opportunity of living your life at roughly your physical peak around 35 to 45 years of age. Yeah, it's not like you walk in and get it established at 80 and so forth. If you go in and get it, Jerry, my understanding is you'll get a remake job. And I can assure you there'll be some different things to it. Now, it's not that you get to go in at 80 and do like many of us do, sort of just amble along, hopefully that you will still be vertical the next day. That is not the concept there. So we're talking about 500, and then there may be the next step is how many would like to be able to live as long as you want. Now, are these possibilities? They seem to be in the frame of scientific technology. That's the other. The other great thing that is dramatic thing is going on is what some people call transhumanism. And that deals with this fact that with the implementation of digital items into our brain power. We are no longer Homo sapiens, but the only thing I could say is you're Homo digital at this point in time. That is, man with digits operating with all of this information internally as a part of it. Well, that is kind of the picture that this religious form offers. And I very much believe it was one that believes it offers all the meaning in life that we believe comes to us through our faith, that it's very doable, and that it's in the future. Now, I want to go real quickly and touch on a couple of other things. The AI movement, and this was a very great surprise to me, is entranced with the idea of space. The notion of living in space, having large colonies in space, is something that they view as absolutely inevitable, highly desirable. Elon Musk believes that we ought to be able to put 1 million people on Mars living there. How they get there and how they live in that climate is subject to a fair amount of speculation. Jeff Bezos has stated that it is his hope that we will put 1 trillion people into space. This will only occur by the building of enormous entities that hold and encompass people in space. And it is the result of what might be called the colonization of space, in which we take and use all of the minerals, whatever it might be, for the development of Homo sapiens expression. It is, in other words, AI or AGI taking over space and putting it under the direction of an enormous computer. Now, I'm going to read something here that probably most of you will not understand, but I understand thoroughly, and I want to be able. Our intelligence, the sixth epoch, is what Mr. Kurzweil alludes to in his writing. He said, our intelligence spreads so far that the universe turns ordinary matter, that we are capable of turning the universe into a matter called computronium. Now, that's where I know most of you are puzzled. But fortunately, I haven't the slightest idea what computronium is, and I don't know of anyone else. Frankly, in my reading, I'd never heard of it. But I will give you an explanation which will be utterly unsatisfying. And that is where matter is organized into the ultimate destiny of computation. How about that? And there it is. We've got it. To say that this is a survey is an overstatement. I do think we need to be aware of this reality. I think we will need to be rethinking. And one last moment, which is an opinion only. No one else has to give it a thought. Certainly challenges the notion of God. There's just, in my mind, no getting around it. It certainly challenges the notion of God as we have perceived God over the course of the epoch of Homo sapiens. Interestingly for me in reading this, there were two things that kind of jumped out at me, and I don't know why, to be truthful. Number one was it created an immense admiration for this globe, an even more immense admiration for this globe that we occupy. I'm just astonished more and more by the beauty, complexity, and the wonder of the world in which we live. It may be an accident, maybe chance. There's two or three things I will say this much. One of them is the original Big Bang, if you'd wanted to kick matter out, and it had landed just a few feet further in space than where we are, we wouldn't exist. And there's another, on another side, and I forget the name of it, but there's another thing, just a few feet more or less, and we wouldn't exist. I'm not a great believer in accidents coming true. It just doesn't make sense to me that those two accidents occurred and we came on. That's one person's belief. Other people may view it entirely differently. And the other thing in terms of recollection, again, one person's, that my sense is our belief in a God that is the ultimate source of humanity is unchanged by this. There will be a change in how we perceive God, in my mind. And that will come. I think inevitably we will be forced to realize that Homo Deus or Homo sapien will be taking on more and more responsibility. But we were given the dominion of this earth in the book of Genesis. And I think this leads us to a point where that will be a reality, and with the great hope that it will be for the good. And I thank you for your time.
Wow.